And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I am your host, Wes Tankersley. Today we have an awesome interview with Megan Henry. We'll talk about her in a little bit. But before we get started, can you please do me a favor? Please like, share, review the show. If you would like to support the show, you can do that by hitting up our Patreon for as little as $4 a month. You can support the show and help me upgrade. Also, we're going to start introducing some of that bonus coverage. So the after party, after show, after talk that we have with guests will start showing up on there. And you can't hear that if you don't become a patron. So thank you very much for supporting us. Nikki Pavlovich is our first Patreon right now. So if you want to do that, just hit the links in the bio. Let's get it going. Our guest today is Megan Henry. She's got a really big, long list of things that she's done. She's been a Division I athlete, 2 different sports, in the Olympics, weightlifting, all kinds of stuff. And I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. But here we go. Megan, thanks for hanging out. You got this long list of stuff you've done, which is really awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I think that the show, we talked a little bit about this before, and I know that you've, Mark England introduced us, and a lot of people have these mental blocks about things, and I'm so interested in like psychology and words and things like that, and how they help you to overcome things. And I assume with all the things that you've been through and the types of, athletics and things like that, and just life in general, because you've got some other issues that, kind of stopped you from chasing your dreams a little bit. Just that grit, that determination, just keep going. So tell us a little bit about, who you are and some of the things that you have done, and then we'll kind of break it down.
For sure. So I most recently retired from competing in skeleton. And if you don't know what that is, it is like luge, but head first. And it's on the same track as bobsled. So if your childhood favorite movie was Cool Runnings, you know what I'm talking about. And so it was an interesting sport. It's an individual sport. You go head first. You experience up to 5 G's of force, and you're going over 80 miles an hour with your chin inches off of the ice. And prior to that, I played sports in college. I played field hockey. I ran track, and I joined the Army after I graduated. And then I was actually recruited to do bobsled, but I was too small for bobsled. I am 5'2", 118 pounds. So it was not really a good fit for bobsled. So, but I had the amazing opportunity to represent Team USA. I was on multiple world championship teams. I was a national champion. I was also in the Army World Class Athlete Program 3 times. And it was an amazing experience. But my mindset evolved a lot throughout my athletic career. Just even the difference from college to my first few years in skeleton are very, very different. I think when I was playing field hockey in college, we had a sports psychologist, but I just really didn't take it that seriously. Partially because I didn't think that the person knew what they were talking about.
It's kind of like one of those things where you get like that mumbo jumbo stuff where it's like, hey, these people don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm doing. I'm working. I'm doing the work, and they have no clue, right?
Yeah, and there's also a difference between knowledge, like textbook knowledge, and wisdom.
Right.
So this person had a lot of textbook knowledge, and I could see that, and so I just really kind of brushed it off. But as I got into skeleton, because I largely field hockey was my main focus, so I came from a team sport and then switch over to something like skeleton, which I would say that it has the similar requirements mentally as like an MMA fighter or golf. Like it's very you have to have a lot of relaxation in the midst of something very chaotic in terms of like MMA fighting. You have to be able to be really cognizant of what's going on even though you're going 80 miles an hour. And so there's this delicate balance of like relaxation versus like forcing something. So early on in my career, I spent a lot of time trying to be perfect and force outcomes. And I realized that it was my mindset that was hindering me from getting what it was that I wanted. My goal was obviously to make an Olympic team. And I knew that I was holding on to like, well, I'm doing all of the things and I'm doing the work and the results aren't showing. So I was trying to force results. And so for me, I had to adopt a different mindset to be successful. And I used a lot of mindfulness practices to do that. And just early on in my career, I also like where your attention goes, energy flows, right? So my attention was very much on things that I did not want. And also my words then matched that. So what I was thinking and what I was speaking, and therefore how I was performing, were all things that I didn't want. And Napoleon Hill said the greatest application of applied faith is learning the art of keeping your mind focused on what it is that you want. And so I had to make a change if I was going to accomplish these goals that I had very high aspirations for. So, yeah.
It's interesting because I think about like because I heard you talk about this on an IG video as well about how like you were focusing too much on what you wanted. How does that kind of differ? Because like I think a lot of times like like the 7 habits, begin with the end in mind. Like if you take care of all the things that are little, is the big thing going to take care of yourself? How is that different from what your thought process was?
I think just having like we need goals, right? We need a direction and clarity on what it is that we want and why we want it. However, having a really strong attachment to that outcome can be detrimental. So we need like, okay, we're going to set the GPS to this destination, but I don't need to be in control of every single turn that I'm taking because the GPS will recalculate. And I was very much holding on to the details, like the fine details of like every step along the way. And I will say, like, there's a difference between, okay, you've got this telescope goal, this big, high, hard goal. And yes, you need to set it out, break it down into smaller milestones, these microscope goals. But I think having the attachment to them can be detrimental. And for me, it was for having such an attachment on, being in control of every single detail is not, there's like, you have to have some flexibility and adaptability because things will change. You just don't have the bird's eye view of, your life in general. You don't have that bird's eye view to know that everything's going to work out despite the details not being completely how you thought they should be.
So I think, I guess what I'm kind of taking from that is that like you kind of obsessed over each step where it became something where every single step had to be perfect, even though it probably couldn't be perfect, but you were trying to, instead of like trying to be the best you could no matter what, you were trying to be the best at every single aspect of that, and it kind of just kind of took you to a different level.
Yeah, and especially if you're being perfectionistic, you're not in the moment. You're actually not being very present, and it doesn't create a sense of flow. It's not a very relaxing mind state to be in. And so the like obsessing over the details is just not conducive for peak performance.
Yeah.
And having that presence of mind was, I really didn't have that early on in my career because I was so obsessed with like, well, I am doing these things. I'm doing A plus B, so it should equal C.
Right.
And that wasn't happening. So, and part of that was especially due to my mindset.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're saying. I'm just sitting there thinking about it. It's like when you start to take all those little steps and obsess over them a little bit, then you're expecting that to be perfect every single time. And say there's 10 steps to the whole puzzle, right? And you've obsessed over all 10 of them, and you can't get past the first one, then you're never going to get to the second one because you need to get the first one perfect before you can get the second one perfect. And I could just see that just unraveling and falling apart.
Definitely. So, and you also like, you don't know what you don't know. So if, for example, so I just most recently competed in a weightlifting competition, and I dropped 10 kilograms, so 22 pounds or so, and I'm very small to begin with, to drop into this weight class because I saw that there was an opportunity to win. And that was my goal going into this competition. It was Masters Nationals, so I'm a national champion in the 49 kilo weight class. And the difference between how I was thinking early on in my skeleton career and actually at the end of my skeleton career to this competition was that my focus was not so much on the details. I had gone into this competition, I had visualized what it was that I wanted. I, saw the successful weigh-in, I saw me successfully completing the lifts. And my intention leading up to this competition was, I want to lift these weights. I would like to PR. I'd like to make all of my lifts. And when I got there the day of, my like intuition had told me that, I had planned out exactly how my results were going to be in my mind, right? But my intuition was like, it doesn't matter what weights you lift today. It doesn't matter if you make all of them. So like release the attachment from those things, because in the end, the overall goal is that I want to win. That's the overall goal. So does it really matter what the details are? So I had deferred to my coach, and I was like, I will just do whatever it is that you say, just because it relieves me of, any sort of decision fatigue. So you tell me, I'm feeling good. I think, we've already discussed what my openers should be. And ultimately I didn't PR, and I failed one of my attempts. And so like, this perfect vision that I had, I luckily detached from, because had I kept the attachment from it, kind of like, just to reiterate what you were saying, if I would have been like, oh my gosh, I have to make all of my lifts. And when I failed that one, it could have totally derailed the rest of the performance, right? Because I would have been so attached to that detail. But because I had shifted my mindset and was like, it doesn't matter, I can still win this, I was able to progress and move forward. So that there's a difference in those two thought processes. You can either be like, oh my gosh, it's not going how I want it to, or you can just trust in yourself, the universe, a higher power, whatever it is that you want to say, that, it's still going to work out. And that has to do with what you're saying to yourself, the words that you're saying. And therefore it affects how you're showing up. It's way more relaxed, and you're just allowing yourself to perform so much better in that type of mindset.
Yeah, I just thinking like all the way through that, because I saw a video that you were talking about, and I used to tell, because I was a teacher, I was a PE teacher, and I had kids that come up to me all the time and saying, I can't. And it's like, yeah, you can't. If you think you can't, it's not going to happen. It's like, I can't,
right.
Changing it to I can, or I will, or I'm not there yet, but I'm going to get there, because in that situation, no one's going to be perfect in anything that they do. Mm-hmm. And if you can understand that, but you're doing the best you can, and then when the failure comes, you have the choice, right? And you change the way that you made that choice, rather than saying it's over because I didn't perfect this one lift. I have the opportunity to perfect the other ones or score higher, because no one else is going to get 10 out of 10, right? They're not going to get that perfect score either. So once you realize that, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter. So using weightlifting, for example, like you have 3 attempts. If you failed the first 2, but you made the last one, like, okay, so what, right?
Yeah.
If you went on to go win, does it really matter that you missed those two? Like, no, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. I still have like I'm trying to understand because there's so many different things here. So you field hockey, track, weightlifting. Where in the hell? Because skeleton a thing in the U.S.? I know people compete, but where? How did you get into that? That's just crazy. If you guys haven't seen this,
yeah,
like I
so
used to watch the Winter Olympics all the time, and it's like the luges feet first, right? And you said skeletons head
yeah.
first, and then bobsled's like 4 people, or they got 2 people. But I mean, it just doesn't. I don't know. Tell me how that jives.
So I was actually recruited to do bobsled, ironically. Um, I was recruited. So Alana Myers Taylor, she is a U.S. bobsledder. She's a multiple Olympic medalist. And she went to George Mason University. I went to American University in DC. So she was reaching out to schools around her alma mater looking for other athletes. And so I was recruited to do bobsled. She contacted my strength coach. My strength coach was like, "Hey, this is this cool thing you should go and try do because you're graduating." So I was graduated, sorry, by that time. So I went I'd actually just gone through basic training and my advanced individual training with the military. And I was like, well, I'm going to go try this thing. So I actually went to Lake Placid. I did do bobsled. I tried it. And I'm so happy that I switched to skeleton, to be honest with you. They told me that I was too small. And they were like, yeah, you're going to have to put on like 30 to 50 pounds.
Oh man.
And I'm like, I do see how tall, like I can't even gain 10 pounds. Right. Um, so they were like, okay, yeah, maybe you should switch to skeleton. And I was the smallest woman in skeleton until I retired, in the world. I was one of the smallest people and I was pushing the heaviest sled. And so I'm like, I clearly was not a good fit for bobsled. I don't even know why we even considered me. But
Did you have to be the driver? How does the positioning work on that? Because I'm assuming like someone with really long legs and the bigger person is in the back. But how does that kind of work?
So most people come into bobsled and they start as a brakeman anyway, just to kind of learn the ropes. They are dealing with a ton of the equipment and moving sleds around and make their way up. And some people that's what they want to do. They want to be a brakeman, and some are really interested in being a pilot. And so the driver. And a lot of the times too, the smaller person will be the pilot. And then all your big, powerful push athletes are brakemen or push athletes. So yeah.
Yeah, because you're the first one in, so you're the last one to be running, right? I mean, that's kind of the way it works.
Right.
Yeah. That's crazy. So you went. So when did this? You had an issue with blood clots at some point. When did this happen in your timeline? Was this during college? Was this during skeleton? When did this happen?
It was early on in my skeleton career. So I had just started really competing in skeleton. And to revert back to your question, the US is a bit behind in terms of skeleton and bobsled. So we usually recruit people from college. And a lot of the other countries that we compete against have been doing skeleton since they were 7 years old or something. They grow up doing it. Right. And we kind of hodgepodge and take from other powerful and explosive sports. So I was really early on in my skeleton career, and I started competing in 2011. I had won national championships in 2012. And then that fall, I started a birth control maneuvering, if anyone's interested in knowing. And within 10 days of taking it, I started to have difficulty breathing. And if I hadn't been training as much as I had been, I probably would not have, not probably, I would not have noticed that I was having difficulty breathing. And I was training at the time 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. I went to go take a combine test, so much like the NFL combine, for example. You're evaluated on your sprinting and your strength, agility. And I went into this combine test and I could not even jog a lap around the track. I was so out of breath and I was like, what is going on? This is so bizarre. I couldn't even warm up. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take my attempts and it'll be okay. So I did my first sprint, which is 45 meters. So if you've done any sort of sprinting, 45 meters is really not far. And I like collapsed on the side of the track, just gasping for breath. And it was really embarrassing at the time because I'm like, what in the hell is going on? Right. And so I end up somehow finishing this combine test, and I had the highest combine score for the women skeleton athlete, which is like mind blowing. If you told me,
from being passed out on the side of the track, I mean, come on, that's amazing.
It was nuts. It was nuts. So and truthfully, that was the strongest I've ever been. I still have not attained that same level of strength since. And so I went, I'm somehow completed this thing. Again, if you told me that I had to do that under the same conditions, I'm not sure that I could. Maybe, I could, because I have a pretty good mindset and some good tools now, but it would definitely not be something I would choose to do willingly. So I finished this combine test. I go to an urgent care and I'm like, look, something is really wrong. I can barely hold a conversation. I'm so out of breath. And they end up giving me an inhaler. I flew across the country. At the time, I was living in Utah. Flew across the country. My boyfriend at the time was in Florida. I went to another doctor there, and they gave me a prescription because I thought I might have like an upper respiratory infection. Flew to Connecticut. So if you know anything about blood clots, flying is super, super dangerous.
Yeah, don't do
so it. I flew 2 pretty lengthy flights. And before I flew home, I told my mom, I'm like, I got to get into a pulmonologist. I can't get into one while I'm here. There's no appointments available. She gets me into a pulmonologist like a week later. And I end up going to a total of 5 doctors. And I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I'm like, I was living in Utah. And your mind starts to justify what's happening to you. So I was like, I'm living in Utah. One of my teammates had mono, so maybe I have mono. There were fires at the time. There were a lot of fires in Utah and Colorado at the time. And I was like, oh, and by the way, I started taking this birth control, and that's the only thing that's changed in my life. I eat the same. I go to bed at the same time every day, super structured life. And so when I went and saw the pulmonologist, he was like, this is very serious. I believe that you have blood clots in your lungs, and it can be very, very dangerous. So I'm going to rush you to get a CAT scan at an emergency imaging center. And so I go over there, get a CAT scan, and I get an ultrasound of my legs. And I'm sitting in this room that was, for some reason, completely dark. And they're doing ultrasound on my legs, but they had already done the CAT scan and sent the results to this doctor. So he called. So they hand me this phone, and I'm sitting there, and he says to me, Megan, unfortunately, you have bilateral pulmonary embolisms in both lungs, and you have a clot off of the main branch of a pulmonary artery. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't even know what the hell this means.
It's not good.
And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to send an ambulance to come get you. And you're going to have to be hospitalized. And so I was supposed to be leaving for my season, just a couple of weeks later. Right. So I just started immediately, uncontrollably, hysterically crying. And so my parents came, and they didn't know. My parents were in shock because they were like, how on earth does she have blood clots? And so they didn't know that I was on this birth control. So they were in total shock. And anyway, fast forward, I go to this hospital. I have to go through um, heparin shots, which are blood thinners in the stomach. It was terrible. And essentially, I was bedridden in a hospital for 10 days. And when I was released, I was allowed to walk for 10 minutes a day. So I was put on blood thinners. I was given this little machine to breathe into and increase my lung capacity. And it was very bizarre because I just went from being, in the best shape of my life, that still holds true to this day. And then I was allowed to walk for 10 minutes a day. And I was on the blood thinner Coumadin, which it's different now. There's different blood thinners out there now, but that one is one you have to continually track and adjust the dosage based on what you're eating and how are you training. So it's just really inconvenient. So I was in and out of doctor's offices like 5 times a week. And so it was a very stark contrast to what my life was before. And during that time, they have to give you the worst case scenario, right? So they're like, Megan, I don't think that you may never be an athlete ever again. And this is going to take a year to recover from, if you can even compete again. And so I, at that time, was just like, no, I'm just going to choose to tell a different story. Yeah. And I had to do that for my sanity. It was just, I needed to tell a different story. And it gave me something to look forward to by saying that I'm going to heal faster than they're saying. So I even set like outcome goals, like they told me I can't get, so that was in September of 2012. They told me I won't have another CAT scan for 6 months, but I'm going to get another CAT scan in 3 months. And I bet that I will be healed by then. So I spent a lot of time visualizing my own healing and visualizing returning to sport and what that would feel like. And just the joy that it would bring me to compete again. And I did get a CAT scan at 3 months. I was not healed, but I was looking really good. Yeah. Definitely better than had I not had that same mindset and self-talk and visualization. And then so about 8 months, I think, is what it took for me to get cleared to come off of blood thinners. So it was under a year. So I did successfully visualize that.
Did they think, obviously you had these blood clots. Was that a side effect of the birth control? Was that something that was always a side effect from the get-go and then you just found out, or did they figure out that was a side effect after?
So it's a known side effect. And when it was prescribed to me, they had said, actually, they asked me if I smoked. And they were like, that's a huge issue for this, and it can cause blood clots. That was the only thing that they said to me. They didn't say that it was, a huge risk overall, which it was. So fast forward, I actually had a classmate from American University who passed away from this same exact birth control from blood clots. And so it was well known. And I just assumed at the time, like, I'm a really healthy individual, that it shouldn't affect me. However, I will say that I had a lot of resistance to going on birth control in general. Mm-hmm. And the lesson that I took from that, and that I would like to impart on other people, is to listen to your intuition. Yeah. Because it definitely knows. And it could have been a self-fulfilling prophecy, or my body it knew that this was not something that was for me. It just wasn't something that was going to mix well with me. So
yeah, it's crazy. My wife used that same thing, I don't know, when we were probably married for a couple of years, and it just I didn't realize that was a side effect. But everything you have comes with a side effect, and it's just crazy mm-hmm. that different people react. But I can almost guarantee that your the shape that you were in and the type of person that you were in was probably what saved you, because if it was someone who wasn't fit or someone who wasn't, in the type of shape you were, athletic competition shape, might not have had the same outcome.
Yeah, and I think it probably brought it out quicker as well. So because I was doing so much training, it could have taken so long for me to experience that. And like I said, I was having difficulty breathing, and at first it was really, really subtle. And had I not been training, as you just never would have even realized that.
Yeah.
And but I do think it probably brought it out quicker so that I had the experience that I had very quickly versus over, a 6-month period of time.
So you trained, you said it took you about 8 months to recover, and then what happened there? Like, because did you even get into a competition yet before this happened? Because you said it was really early, or did you have to wait?
Yeah. So it was before my season started when it happened to me. So I missed that whole season.
So this was your first season that you missed. The very first one.
Yes. Yeah. So it was the 2012 to 2013 season, which was the season before. Yes, the season before the Olympic season.
Yeah. But so 8 months is over. You're cleared. You're good to go. Where did it go from there? Now what?
So I luckily got on ice just at the end of the very end of the season, and I got back onto my sled, which was something that I had visualized, just to even take a couple of runs, which is what I did. Then the season was over. And so I got to go into an off season, train fully, which was very exciting. I was really just overwhelmed with joy about it. Yeah. And I went into the following season, and I was just nowhere near where I was when I left. And part of that was because I was so early on in my career. And the other part is because being away for a season, people leapfrog you. They get more experience.
Right.
Skeleton, you can only do from October to March anyway. You usually only get 2 runs a day. So it's not something that's easy to accumulate those, 10,000 hours. If we're going by that 10,000 hour rule,
two runs a day is all you could do.
So if you're just in a training environment and it's not a race week, did I freeze here?
No, you're good. I see you. You're all right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're good. I see you. I can see what you're doing. You're fine.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So in a race week, you get 3 days of 2 training runs, and that's it. And then you get 2 race runs. So if you've never been to a track, it's tough. It is. Right. It's a tough challenge to become an expert very quickly right before a competition with only 6 training runs. And so, so I came back and I left as the national champion, and then I barely made it inside the top 10 for the US. And so that was a mental struggle for sure. Yeah. And just having to come back, and I just kept setting goals for myself. And kind of like I said before, you have to make adjustments. So, okay, I didn't make the national team / Olympic team. However, I still can come back and perform this way in these races. Or next year, I want to make the national team and the world championship team, which is what I ended up doing. I ended up making a world championship team the following year after the Olympic year. And it was a long road back. It really was. Yeah. It took a lot of time. It was, and partially that's because of me. It had to do with what I was focusing on, and where my attention was, the goals that I had, and how much attachment I had to them. So over time, that evolved. I got really, really into mindfulness and meditation and presence, and just expressing gratitude, and it really did impact my performance. And just embracing that we really are the creators of our reality, and that our reality is just a reflection of our internal state.
At what point in this whole story that we're talking about did this become something that you kind of let go of the perfectionism, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, and then realize that it's more about just yourself and the mindfulness and all that stuff? When did that happen?
Well, I did recognize even prior to the blood clot experience that this was something that I needed to work on. And so I started to do, and I mean, it spanned years. It truly was probably 6 years or something.
Yeah, it's not
that
easy. I think that's what most people don't understand, is it's not, you can't just flip a switch. There's a lot to it.
Well, and you spend, so at the time I was 30 something years old. I'm 35 now. If you spent 30 years of your life thinking a certain way and raised in a certain environment, it's not overnight that you're going to reverse those thoughts and just how you subconsciously operate and believe, and core beliefs that you have to address. So I did a lot of internal work, a lot of introspection, and being like, why do I think this way? Why am I so negative? How can I be better? And I was always drawn towards meditation and the spiritual aspect, and that's super powerful. And I think that was really a great avenue for me. And not everybody has to go that route, but I did, and it was very helpful for me.
Well, I think it's just like you were talking about, how like you have this. I was the same way. Like my changing is, the last 4 years I've been working on thinking of things a different way, because I was always like, I'm gonna do the best I can, and if something good happens, then I'll be surprised. If something bad happens, I'm just ready for it, because that's gonna happen. And that just really isn't the way to think about it for me anymore. And if you realize that no matter what, everything that you do, whether it's successful or not, is a little cog to making that wheel turn, you're going to get there a little bit easier. And that switch was just something for me that was really tough. And I don't know if that's like an athlete mentality or what, but because I was an athlete, and that was the way that I thought about it too, is like, I've got to do this, and if I don't, then I'm not good at what I did. Like, I didn't get a Division I football scholarship, and I was pissed. And I could have took what I had. Like, I could have been thankful for what I had and just did it, but I was unsatisfied. It's just weird.
I can relate. So I actually was an Olympic alternate in 2022. I had a similar experience. So because I'm in the military, I was not allowed to compete during COVID. And so it was very frustrating. So I essentially, again, for the second time, so I had the blood clot experience. And then I had this experience where I sat out the whole season before the Olympics. I had a total of 50 runs in that season. And there's some really cool things that happened during the season before the Olympics. I spent so much time visualizing and all of the self-talk and the training that I focused on, that I was able to set 2 track records during Olympic trials. I was, again, attached to, I wanted to be the overall winner of team trials. And so we had our first race in Park City. The first day, first run, I had visualized it over and over and over again that I was going to set this track record. So I come down, first run, I set the track record, and then one of my teammates comes and they tied me. And it just set me off, because I was like, well, I have to beat this person. Like, what? This person just tied my track record. And it really did it. It like just put me off kilter a bit. And so I ended up coming in second the next day. And then I started to unravel, because I was attached to, well, I'm supposed to be winning these races. And so then we go and we compete in Lake Placid for the final 2 races. And then the first day I finished in 5th there. And so I was just like absolutely unraveling. And then the next day I came back, I pulled it together, had some self-talk and some outside perspective shift. And I set the track record the first run. And then I'm like, I'm going to better it. I'm going to do even better next run, and I'm going to win. And I finished in third. So overall, I finished in third in all of the races. And then I went into the season, and I just did not really feel like I was in the same rhythm as when I left. So the season prior, I was a World Cup medalist. I was number 1 in the US, and I was 8th overall on World Cup, and I had a really nice trajectory. Then I had this whole season off, come back, go to, during the Olympic season, we go to an Olympic test event. So we flew to China, and I crashed every day, almost every run. I was miserable. I was crashing. I just did not feel like I was at one with my sled.
Uh-huh.
And so I had the same sort of experience where my mindset was reverting back to how I should be sliding. So should, that's a very pressurized word. And how like prior experiences on other tracks. So when we got to racing elsewhere, I was attached to, well, last time I was here, I came in third. And so I should be finishing in third or higher. And then I finished in seventh. And then I was so attached to that. And so I ultimately did not make an Olympic team because I was so attached to those prior outcomes. And rather than kind of like in the example I gave before, rather than being like, okay, I didn't get third at this race, but there's still plenty of time for me to make this. I just didn't regroup. I thought that I should have known better, and I could have utilized either a mental performance coach, a sports psych, whomever, to help me re-engage, like recalibrate, re-engage. And I just didn't. And so I missed out on making an Olympic team by 12 points. And we were all, the US women were all back to back. So we have 3 that were racing on World Cup at the time. We only sent 2. And we were constantly flip-flopping. And I was ahead in points at the final race. And then I dropped, and I lost the spot by 12 points. And oh man, there was a point for me to say that. What was your original question?
I'm lost in the fact that just the fact that you were able to, keep going after that. The self-talk and those things are the things that I really, it's amazing to listen to how you said like should, that's something that you put in your head, like I should do this. And that's not really what it's about. But where are you now with that? Like, I know that, or you're one of the coaches with Mark, right? Ed and Lifted.
Yes.
And this is something that you've gotten into, and you're working on a psychology degree, or do you already have that? Are you a sports psychologist, or you're working on that?
No, I will graduate in August. I'm very excited.
Yeah. So that switch, that's what we were talking about when that switch happened. Like, it was in between, kind of like it's kind of a journey, and it's never something that is just super easy. Like, you're working on it constantly, and you have to be willing to work on it every single day, or you'll lose it, right?
Definitely. And like I said to myself, well, I should know better. I have been doing all of this introspective work, so this should be easy for me, And it wasn't. And to go back to you saying about your football career,
yeah,
and what success meant for you, and what does success look like for you? So for me, it was, I wanted to make an Olympic team, and that's something you only have an opportunity to do once every 4 years. So am I a failure because I didn't make an Olympic team? At first, I had such strong emotion about it. So it took me some time to gain perspective and be like, my career was not a failure because I didn't make this one thing. I set 2 track records. I've been a World Cup medalist. I was number 1 in the US for several years. I was the overall winner in team trials multiple years in a row. I made multiple world championship teams. And so the definition of success okay, on paper, uh, Megan Henry did not make an Olympic team. So, okay, you failed that one thing. But overall, my career was remarkable. It was challenging. It had so many ups and downs. It was inspiring. It was enlightening. I learned so much from that, and it makes me such a better coach
Yeah.
now. And so I had the attachment to make an Olympic team, but I didn't have the perspective to be like, well, this is going to make me really awesome and really relatable as a coach. I'm
Yeah.
uniquely qualified because most people aren't going to relate to the gold medalist because that's just not what most people are doing. They're not pursuing
Right.
a gold medal every single day. Is it admirable? Yes. But I have failed at the highest level where I did not make an Olympic team. And I've had ups and downs and overcome a lot of adversity. And so I think that overall, my career was a success. And I think success is pursuing something until completion.
Right.
And for me, the completion happened to be that I didn't make it. And I was done. Like my body and my mind were done when I didn't make it. Part of that had to do with my team environment as well. I had a really toxic team. And so for me, I had to be like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And would I be here um, if I still made an Olympic team? Would I continue? Like, is this an environment that's going to make me thrive and bring out the absolute best in me? And so for me, the answer was no. So I left.
Yeah, and that is exactly kind of the way it was for me too with football. It was like I felt like I was just done. Like I don't even watch it anymore. You know, it's to the point where like when I was done with that, like I wiped that away. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't like you were talking about. I didn't fail. I mean, I did get a scholarship. That was my goal, was to get a scholarship, but it just wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I was okay with letting that go, because if I couldn't be what I wanted, I was going to do something different. And that just kind of where that shift went. And it's crazy how like it took me a while to get over that, but I really loved baseball when I was growing up, because I didn't realize this until later on in life when I coached it, you know, as a coach, telling kids, you know, like watching them go up there at bat, and then just like, it's a game of failure. Like you learn to fail when you play baseball, and a successful batting average is 300. That means you failed a lot. Seven out of those 10 times you failed, and you keep going back and getting back in that batter's box and swinging again. But once you figure that out, I feel like it kind of just unlocks a whole lot of things. Is that it's not the end result. It's an invitation to try again. And if you're willing to put the effort in, it's going to happen. And it doesn't have to be the same thing over and over again.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing. I just posted something on my story. I might not get the wording exact, but I said the fastest way to get good at something and the fastest way to succeed is to make a lot of errors.
Yeah.
And that's how you get good at something. And that's where the learning and growth takes place. And I loved John Kavanagh's book. He's Conor McGregor's coach, Win or Learn. That's huge, because we've just been taught that for whatever reason that failure means, or there's so much weight put on failure and not making a certain thing and not accomplishing something. But there's so much more that comes from failure. Like I learned so much more from not making an Olympic team than I would have had I made it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
That's the thing though. Like if you have that mentality, if you're willing to learn from whatever that mistake is, it's never going to be a mistake, because it just is something that taught you how to do it again, do it a different way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great thing. So tell us, you know, it's been great having you on here, and we're kind of running low on time here, but tell us, like, if people want to follow you and, hit you up or anything like that, where can they find you? What can they do?
Sure. So I'm working on a website right now, but if you want to get at me, any social media channel, I'm at the Savage Meglet. Send me a DM. You can also email me, Megan at thesavagemeglet.com. And I'd love to hear any of your stories about your personal successes and your adversities and triumphs. And if you want any advice on anything having to do with mindset, send me a DM. And we'll chat.
Yeah, it's just a great thing to know that there are people who are willing to work through that. And I think your story is going to be awesome to help other people see that. We'll make sure we post where they can find you on the show notes, and we've got a lot of good information to share with you. So, Megan, thanks for hanging out with us today, and really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, that is the end of the show. As I said before, if you want to check out some of the after talk, go over to Patreon, join for as little as $4 a month. You can help us to grow the show. And until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.